Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Covey Wellness Center podcast. Here we are in season 3. I'm your host, Sarah Joy Covey, and I'm excited to continue our conversations with authors. If you've been listening along in this season, you will have heard some really interesting people who are working in the writing space as well as other professional spaces, which naturally happens. People write and work at other things as well, and sharing different stories, memoirs, perspectives that we've been talking about over the last few sessions. And so today we're picking up the conversation with a special guest. We have Karen Snow here. She's a naturopathic doctor, and she has written a story about her own personal and professional journey with infertility. And so some of you might have listened to our podcast in season 2 on infertility, which was a very highly listened to and shared podcast, because I do think this is a challenge that so many people are facing. And it's a really emotional challenge. And so it intersects very much with the mental health and wellness of our listeners and of the people we're serving here at the center. So there's just a natural connection here that we want to explore and talk about through the lens of Karen's personal experience and journey and her professional expertise to bring to bear on the subject. So really excited to have you here, Karen. Thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Of course. It's nice to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I know it's one that people are having oftentimes behind closed doors. And I think it's really important to bring some of these conversations to light and help people find great resources that can help support them on this journey. So before we get into all of that, can you just give us a little bit of detail about who you are so people can kind of get a sense for who Karen is and the context in which you find yourself professionally, personally, whatever details you'd like to share.
Okay. It's good to be here. I'm Karen Snow, I'm a naturopathic doctor in Thornton and Cookstown. So I work out of my home office here, and then I have an office in Cookstown as well. And so I operate a general family practice, so seeing a range of ages and a range of conditions. And so not all of what I do is related to infertility. That's kind of like a thing on the side that's just become part of my world.
Right.
But I like to see a variety of people and conditions. And when I'm not working, I am playing with my son, who's coming on 6 this summer. And we just have lots of time outside, and we live with my husband and our son on a farm, just as like a hobby farm that we enjoy. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, doesn't that sound amazing? I think there's so many people who are exploring aspects of sort of getting back to nature and to the earth, and whether it's hobby farming or big gardens or grounding or forest bathing, all these things, are really making a comeback. And I think it's absolutely for the betterment of our health and wellness. So that's amazing. So I would love to start by just hearing about sort of the origin story of this book. So the book is called Infertility Lies, a journey of discovering truth. And it's a memoir style book, although there's lots of great content in there as well that provides resources and information as well, which I think is sort of a unique blend. It's your personal story, but interspersed with all of this other really great resource kind of material. And so tell us a little bit about the origin story. What is it that brought you to want to write this book?
So it was towards the end of my personal infertility journey where, the season was coming to a close, and then we were moving forward with pursuing adoption, which was going to be a several-year process. And I can remember just feeling like I had so much information in my brain, so much I was working through myself as one journey was coming to a close, another one was beginning. That I remember thinking like that there was a bit of a gap in my own personal care going through the process. I had all of my medical needs met. I had professionals who'd been to Harvard on like who were caring for me, and the best of the best were on my team. So I felt really confident in that. But where I felt was lacking was the emotional support.
Yes.
And I didn't realize the impact of that until I was just coming up with all of these thoughts and all of these feelings and processing everything, where I'm like, what would I want to share with my younger self? What would I want to offer to
Right.
someone starting this process where that I could have benefited from having known back then at
Yes.
this, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so many people, that's sort of the niche spot of where people, their writing intersects their life is I'm just
Yes.
that bit ahead of somebody and I have some wisdom to offer on that journey because I've lived it and
Yes.
I know what I wish I had known. And so I have this magic perspective now that I can pay forward a little bit and
Totally.
consolidate in some way and really share in a meaningful way with the world. So it sounds
Yeah.
like you did a lot of your own research along the way to try to piece those parts together, but we're sort of feeling like that wasn't maybe available to the same extent that you would have wanted it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of learning comes like in hindsight. So while I
Yes.
might have had like pieces of the puzzle along the way, I kind of put it together in that time where that my infertility journey had come to a conclusion.
Yes.
And so then I had time to sit in it, had time to piece these thoughts together in a more like congruent way.
Yes.
And yeah, so that was an important piece. I can remember specifically, I had gone to the spa with my sister and I brought a notebook with me. And we were there for the entire day from start to finish. And when I was sitting in my note with my notebook, I was just like ravenously writing, like just I had all
Just
of
pouring out.
pouring out. And
Yes.
I'm like, no, I have a book here. I have a book somewhere in there. And so I just was writing these key concepts of kind of telling myself in that moment some of those things that I'd worked through. But then,
Yes.
just kind of breaking that down into why I maybe originally thought certain things and then how I'd come to a better resolution that felt better at the time.
Healthier. Yeah. You know,
Healthier
what's
thought process.
what's interesting to me is in our psychotherapy work, we do, what we would call, summarizing or consolidating. And so as you've gone through treatment and periodically throughout treatment, even within the session itself, we'll do sort of a recap and a looking back on the session and kind of the takeaways. But in the grand scope of treatment, you sort of hit these points where you do that reflective piece and say, okay, I can see now, like you say, in hindsight, this is how far I've come. This is what I've learned. This is how I'm making meaning of that. And sometimes as you're navigating it, you just can't see that because you're in it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so there's a really therapeutic value for you, even in the doing of that outpouring of,
Yeah.
this is what I've learned. This is what I understand now. This is what I used to think. This is how I think now and how much healthier and whole
Yeah.
I feel as a result of those shifts. So that's, it would be a process that for you would be so healing, but then also a gift to other people.
That was the goal for sure.
Yeah.
And it felt that way in working through that. And then I was like, I hope this can be a tool for people to offer that level of support during their care.
Yes. And I'm assuming from the reviews and things on the book that people are actually resonating with what your goal was and saying, yeah, this is helpful. And thank you for saying the things that you said. And so I wonder, I mean, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your infertility journey, just so that people who
Yeah.
are listening can kind of understand a bit of that story. And then maybe
Mhm.
just talk about the points where that might intersect with others who are listening. I think in telling your story, people will see themselves in parts of that, maybe
Yeah.
some more so than others. But let's just maybe think about that a little bit together.
Yeah. So when we were like newly married and imagining our family, you have these visions of what this is going to look like. And
Yes.
so we got pregnant right away and that was exciting and life was just kind of ticking along. And then shortly after we miscarried, which was like, and it's a very common experience, but when you go through it on an individual level, it's very overwhelming. I can remember it being like very
Mm,
shocking and
yes.
very painful. But then we just kind of imagined that, we get pregnant again easily as it had been the first time. And then,
Yeah.
a year goes by and we started
Yes.
looking into fertility, like went to a fertility clinic, had assessments done, like nothing's showing up on assessments. We did several treatments and like pursued intrauterine insemination, IUI, IVF, like
Yes.
did the
The
whole
whole
nine,
gamut. Yes.
the whole thing. And And along the way, we just like, okay, the next treatment just will probably work. And then it didn't, and it didn't, and it didn't. And
Right.
so, yeah, it felt like a very lonely experience at the time. I hadn't known anyone else going through it. So it did feel
Right.
lonely, even though I was going to these busy clinics of people going through the same thing. It still
Right.
on a personal level felt lonely because here I am seeing all my friends moving forward with building their families and
Yeah.
seemingly without issues. And then, so yeah, I remember it feeling lonely,
Really isolating. And even though you
isolating.
can see that there's all these people who are in need and maybe are
Yeah,
experiencing some of that isolation themselves, or sometimes people can feel a lot of shame around the
yeah,
journey and not want
I
to talk
did.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so there's these spaces that almost feel like we self censor. And then,
yeah,
people are unable to process that emotional landscape. And yet it's juxtaposed against visually seeing that people are navigating it. So,
totally.
what a strange feeling to feel so surrounded and yet so isolated.
I can remember waiting in line for like an ultrasound at the time. You had to line up and it was like first come, first serve. So you try to quickly get in so you can get to work. And it's this
Yeah.
whole dynamic. But I can remember being in line with these other women and I just like asked the person in front of me, like, how are you doing? And and then we just was talked like these two,
Yeah.
another a stranger to me, and we
Yeah.
just genuinely shared how we were doing. And I can remember like then other women started kind of coming around. We all needed
Yes.
this. We
That's
needed
right.
this like very real conversation. Like we know we're all doing this. No one else is at 7 a.m. lining up in a closed building ultrasound clinic. We are all there for our assessments.
Yeah.
And it was such a it was such a freeing feeling that we could all openly talk about something that we were all in our personal lives very closed about. And so
Right.
that was a really special moment. And then from that point forward, I actually just had open conversation with random people when I was at my appointments because it was so connecting
Yes.
and it was a validating conversations for us to have too.
Yeah. There's something about, like, I know, so Oasis Fertility Support Network, um,
Yeah.
that's who we interviewed in season 2, is the founder of that. And one of the main reasons that they want to come together is to provide spaces for people to connect and share their stories, because there's so much power in, even if your story isn't changing
Right.
or isn't leading to the conclusion that you want, the aspect of feeling like you are not alone in that journey is so
Mhm.
empowering to people. And there's, like you're saying, there's sort of this understanding, I'm standing in this line, we're all here for the same reason. So if I venture going first and say, hey, how are you doing? Then that opens up the door. That
Yeah.
vulnerability opens up the door for somebody else to actually name the thing that's already in the room,
It's in
because
the
everybody's
room.
already there.
Yeah.
But there's also, I think, like any particular group that has a shared struggle, there's like terminology and acronyms
Right.
and specifics to the experience that you can just say and everybody resonates, right? You don't have to
Yes.
explain what that is or provide a pamphlet or like educate the person you're trying to share your
Right.
sadness with, because you can say day one and
Right.
people are like, oh yeah, day one. Yeah. Like
Right.
we get it.
We
And
get it.
so I think, among all of the other types of treatment and
Yeah.
all of the advice and just navigating all of the people who think they have an opinion about how it should
Yes.
be or what you should do and the stupid things people say, like all those kinds of things, you could
Yeah.
say those in a group like that and feel understood and validated. And you don't have to give all of that additional context, I don't think. So it's just very liberating, and use the word
Yeah.
validating and affirming. I think it's so important for people not, I mean, obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm going to advocate for
Yeah.
having therapy and having other people in your lives to support you on the journey. The research definitely says that social support
Totally.
is key, but I don't think people need to navigate any of their journeys alone. And this is
No.
it's a strange one in that I think it's coming to light in a way that's inviting people into that. But that wasn't the narrative not that long ago. Like, I think your
It wasn't.
story is more commonly the case of people walking through this. They're really hiding in some ways.
Totally. And I felt that way too. And it was unusual. And I think it did stem from shame for me. Now that I'm in looking back, I'm like, okay, I'm the person who like sets a goal and works towards it, works hard, and then more often than not achieves the goal. And so in this situation, I'm like, it felt like something was wrong with me. I'm like,
Yeah.
what, I'm putting in so much effort and it doesn't equate in the same way to other goals
The
in
result.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember, thinking like, yeah, this is rooted in shame. And I like felt
Mm.
like I could not tell people because people would like judge me for it. And in hindsight, I'm like, it's a medical
Yeah.
thing. It's not anything other than that. And so
Yeah.
it's not a lack of effort or a lack of anything. It just
Right.
is what it is in the same way any other medical condition are what they are.
Yes. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting how, I always talk about guilt and shame because I think it's important for people to understand the difference between the two. And, guilt is where you literally have done something wrong, morally, ethically, legally. You hit a car and then drove off without taking
Right.
responsibility, right? And so you have these feelings of guilt that are meant to propel you towards resolving them towards the right action. And so I did this thing that was wrong. Now I seek to make amends and do the things to repair that. And
Right.
those guilt feelings are important. We want people to feel guilty when they have actually caused harm because that leads towards the restoration of that harm and reparation and all of that. But so many people have the same feeling that's pervasive, that's not attached to actually anything they've done wrong. So they're constantly have this feeling of guilt and they feel like
Right.
they're guilty, but really what they're feeling is that shame. Like
Yeah.
somehow I'm defective or I am wrong. Like my identity is, and so
Right.
then you can't do anything about it because you actually aren't wrong. You haven't
Right.
done something wrong. You're not, and so you have this energy that's trying to propel you towards making something right, but there's no actual incidence of wrongdoing that creates that
Right.
feeling. And so it just looms. I mean, that's true for so many people, whether it's an
Yeah.
infertility journey or not, but just that the pervasive power of shame over people's lives
Hmm.
to label something and push them into secrecy, right? And
Right.
so much of what alleviates the power of shame is to say out loud the things, to bring it to the light, to not
Yeah.
hide. So that's such an important message, I think, for anyone dealing with mental
Yeah.
health stuff that, shame can really be operating and keeping you from getting the help you need because there's a lot of assumptions about how people are going to respond to you
Right.
or to judge you and that to be fair, I think there are a lot of people who think they know what they're talking about in this
Right.
space. And like I'll say with any even parenting type challenge or question,
Right.
people seem to think they're experts on things that they don't have any expertise on. And so there may
Yeah.
be some of that has come back to you to reinforce, maybe I just can't talk to people because they're going to think I'm not trying hard enough, or they're going to think that
Right.
I'm somehow defective. I'm not doing the right supplements. I wonder for you too,
Yeah.
if there's this added layer of being a professional, working with people in health and going through a health journey. I know for me,
Yeah.
it's always hard, right? It's that incongruence of like, I'm speaking to people about their restorative burnout needs and I'm going through burnout. And so how do I
Yeah.
navigate that? Maybe
It's
talk a
so
little bit
true.
about that.
I can remember going to an appointment and just feeling like, oh my goodness, I do not like being on this side of the table.
Mm.
I prefer being on the other side of the table. I prefer like holding other
Solution
people.
oriented and
Yeah.
yes.
I'm like, I will sit in other people's challenges and discomforts and we'll strategize and come up with a plan. Like that feels really good to me. That's
Yes.
my wheelhouse. I don't want to be the one coming with the problems. And so I remember thinking like, this is actually a really good exercise for me to like feel how vulnerable it is to sit here and say,
Yes.
these are my challenges. I need your help. That
Yeah.
was challenging. And
Yes.
so yeah, it was good character development and character kind of like, when you feel like feeling really uncomfortable, you're like, this is
Yeah.
growth happening here and bringing greater awareness. So I can bring even more empathy and understanding to people coming to me who are going through some challenges themselves.
I
So
wonder, yeah, it shapes us, right? I talk about the formational journey that we have, because I'm training therapists here at the center all the time. And so I talk a
yeah,
lot about how we are formed, and I'm sure it's similar that we are formed by our lives and our experience, to
yeah,
be the practitioners that we are. And so
yeah,
your experience, as you say, on the other side of that table becomes really valuable on the side that you usually operate
right.
from, right? To
Yes,
add that perspective, like you say, that empathy, that understanding, like, oh, what is the vulnerability that people are experiencing, or how much anxiety or shame might they be experiencing
right.
related to this health issue,
Yeah,
whatever that might be. But there's also this, holding space for, to be in your own health journey, and, also helping other people in their health journey. And I know Henry Nouwen has that a wounded healer
right.
label for that serving, caring work.
Yes.
And I think that's so true, right? Because it's not like we've
Oh,
arrived in our health journeys, whatever aspect of health we're
no,
looking at. So there's some humility with that too. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I can remember I'd go to the office and then I have to like zip out, have my ultrasound, come back to the office. And it was just like, I have to operate like nothing else is happening in my life. Meanwhile, like there's a lot happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So at some point you kind of look back, like, how did that go? How was that? It was quite
Yeah.
challenging, honestly. I didn't give myself space to feel how challenging it was at the time. It was just kind of go mode and get these things done.
Yeah. That
But
survival instinct of just,
yeah,
just put one foot in front of the other. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I wonder if, I'm sure that other people are listening to this and already intersecting with some things where like, yeah, I've felt that shame, or I
yeah,
definitely was just trying to barrel ahead with the life where I had to keep showing up, even though all this stuff was going on. I
yeah.
wonder if, you, when you think about that hindsight knowledge that through the book, you want to offer, what are some of the things that you'd want to say to people navigating infertility journeys that you wish you had known? Or you could even
Hmm.
go into some of the myths that you debunk, like whatever you think is like, this is,
Yeah.
if I could just encourage people with this information or this perspective, I would love for them to have that as a gift from my experience.
Um, the concept of like working harder, like you have to work harder to get the
Yeah.
result you're looking for. Like it's just like a spinning your wheels kind of mindset to have.
Yes.
And so like you can't work harder. Pardon me.
That's okay.
We can't like work harder towards this. The
Yeah.
end result will be what it will be. And so if
Right.
you can just be kind to yourself, if I could have been kinder to myself instead of, yeah, work harder, take more supplements, do more, do more. Like at one point, I think I was taking like 25 supplements going for acupuncture every week. And not that any of these things
Oh,
are bad. It's
right.
just like spinning my wheels, like doing
Sort of
everything,
grasping at all these different possibilities. Yeah.
grasping as though I had control over the outcome. And it's like,
Right.
it's a harsh reality that we don't. Like there
Yeah.
isn't a known outcome that anyone can know.
Right.
It will be what it will be. And so if there's a level of just being softer with yourself,
Mhm.
going through the process and doing your due diligence of what you need to do or what you choose to do,
Mhm.
but not one particular thing necessarily would be like the thing that needed to be done. It's like the outcome is known at some point and you're just working along the journey to get there.
Yes.
So a kinder, more self-compassionate approach to
Mhm.
do what you can do and then just like settle into the reality of the
Yeah.
efforts don't always equate to what we had expected
Yeah.
and it's not your fault in that way either.
Right. Right. Like if I'd only taken that supplement for longer, this would
Right.
change this. Or if I'd only done this, I think there's a lot of that striving mentality. Like you say, that somehow if I just do the right things, I can
Yes.
create this outcome. And that equation sets up a success or failure kind of
Totally.
perspective, which is not a helpful perspective because it's not about success or failure.
It's
Right. And
not.
And so how can you be as gentle with yourself? I love Andy Colbert's book, Try Softer. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
I'm familiar. I must read it. It's come up a few times. This is my
Yes.
probably the third time I've heard it. I'm like, okay, I need to read that.
Well, even your phrasing, I mean, I think you would resonate so much with her self-compassion and cultivation and really her own journey. I think for so many people, we can relate to that impetus to just want to do more, to hustle more, to try harder, to come up with, and sometimes we just have to try softer.
Try softer. It's
That
so
is
true.
right. And so that was her own journey as well. And she's a clinical therapist. And so she talks about and has some really great resources. So we'll link that. And of course, it's available at the bookshop here at Covey Wellness Center too. But that concept is so important, that gentleness with self, that non-judgmental, open-handed, sort of surrendered place.
Yes.
I think there's this white knuckle grasping. And
100%.
again, maybe your story is infertility, but maybe it's some other story that you're in that's a white knuckle grasping to just try and make it work, to muscle your way through. And really, I want to invite people to consider what it would mean to open up your hands and rest and be kind and just let things unfold as they will, and surround yourself with people who are life-giving and do things that are caring for yourself along the way. Like, that's such an important message for people in their mental health and wellness in general.
I can remember it was like 2018. This was or 2017. And it's like, okay, we were closing at our last round of IVF, and I was white knuckling for a few years in all reality. Like, it was a few years of white knuckling and just grinding and forcing and, going so hard. And at the beginning of the year, it was the first year I'd done this where I was choosing a word for the year.
Yeah.
And my word for the year was surrender. And it was the most impactful word I've ever chosen. Because I remember thinking, we're finishing this season. We're closing this chapter, however it's going to come to be. Mm-hmm. And I've done the whole pushing, striving. There's nothing more that's available for me to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just surrender to the outcome. I'm just going to the hands open, surrender to, this is going to play out as it's going to. Mm-hmm. And I'm trusting the process. And I can remember feeling a great relief physically over me in that shift mindset. And it wouldn't have been available to me before. It wouldn't have been available for me to be in a space of surrender in looking back. But it would have been a softer journey had I been able to, right? Yeah. It was that time where I was, okay, I must, there's no other way forward here. There's no other way forward.
Yeah, I've heard that story before from other people in the journey too. You sort of, you do the pieces, and then it's almost that grief journey really, where you do all those pieces and then you get to the point where there's a acceptance that leads then to a new hopefulness, whatever way that's going to unfold. If that is with a pregnancy that takes and continues through, if that is with an adoption journey, if that is with a journey of just having a family of two, or, whatever however those trajectories play out, there's sort of this sense in which I'm done with the things that I can try. Yes. And I am now open to a new way of moving forward, and I'm releasing the expectation or the, striving, like we've said, or even the the clinging, maybe is the word that to a particular story, and really opening to a new possibility of restoring your life as it moves forward from those points. And there's this sort of real release. And I often actually, when I'm working with clients who are in whatever ways white knuckling, I'll say to them, grip your neck, actually do the action of white knuckling and feel the tension of that tightly, and then gently open it up and feel how that feels in your body as a symbol of what you're trying to do mentally, emotionally, spiritually in that moment. And it's a really sort of palpable
Right.
exercise. But it is, I think, an important turn for people at some point in the journey when they're ready for that to
Yeah.
surrender, regardless of what that surrender leads to.
Exactly. And that's
I
part of it is like it can't be then surrendering to this outcome. It's like, no, surrendering to like literally however this
yeah,
is going to play out.
yes,
I'm just going to go along here
I will
and
receive it.
receive it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I talk
Yeah.
a lot about that open-handed posture, allowing us to receive
Yeah.
and release, right? So
Totally.
we can receive, but we can also let things go from that same
Yeah.
space because we're not clinging, we're not resisting, So,
Absolutely.
wow. Yeah, so profound.
Uh,
Go ahead.
no, I was, oh, I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Oh, I remember when I was writing at the start of my, like, doing some paperwork and getting things lined up for pursuing adoption to build our family.
Yes.
I remember thinking, I want to finish my book before there's a conclusion to my story,
Right.
because sometimes we often will hear from people who, yeah, once everything's been tied off into a bow,
Yes.
it's like, okay, yeah, easy for her to say because now she has her family and everything's fine. It's like I wanted to finish my book before I had my outcome. Because
Yes.
like there's something there about like just sitting in the uncertainty,
Yes.
because that's the part that's so hard. And so I wanted to connect with people from the place of my journey is not over yet. I'm still in it too. And so I get the challenges. I'm still in this. Like, I don't know how this family is going to come to be. I don't know if I'm going to have a family
Yeah.
with a child. Because yeah, it's sometimes like challenging to hear from people who have things all sorted when the real challenge is not having it sorted and having no idea how it's going to move forward. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's so good to authentically capture that in that point in your story because that's the point of intersection that people are going to pick up the book. And so to
Yeah.
not paint like almost a story arc that goes to the
Right.
natural resolution because there is so much of that. I mean, I do think that word uncertainty, I
Yeah.
think that is probably, um, the pervasive theme of the journey in some ways is just that I never really know how this is going to go from one
Right.
cycle to the next. And so
Yeah.
it's just that roller coaster of emotions through that time. But being able to navigate that movement, that uncertainty is so much a part of people's stories. However, their pieces of the puzzle unfold even throughout that. But that's such a common theme and
Yeah.
so unsettling for people. We want to resolve it. We want those neat and tidy
Right.
bows, but it's not really how the journey works. And so to be able to name
No.
that and stay in that authentic place for readers, I bet that's very resonant for them.
Yeah. Yeah. When I officially did complete the book at the time I did, I had met our son just by how the timing went.
Yes.
But I wanted to keep the majority of it being from a place of before. Um,
Yes.
yeah, because there was several years there of the uncertainty where that from that tone, from that space is how I wanted to connect with people on their journey too. To like we can still like work through some of these common lies we tell ourselves, which is kind of the theme of the book, just lies that I
Yes.
had believed to be true that were holding me back from feeling like emotionally well during that time. And
Mm.
and so yeah, I wanted to like I had come to the place at that time where I had reworked some of those like lies that I had come to tell myself. I'd
Yes.
reworked that prior to the resolution. So I feel like it's available. It's there. If we
Yes.
allow ourselves to like sit and work through what we're going through, we can sit in the discomfort of common things infertility can lead us to believe. Um, but still come to a place of working through that before a resolution is
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yes, because even if the circumstance doesn't change, we do have control over how we think about it and how that sits in our bodies then and in our hearts.
Yeah.
And so, I often think it's important to tell ourselves the truth, that that's actually a strategy to go from what an automatic narrative is, maybe that comes forward for us. Maybe it's a shame narrative or something. And then to really move that to, well, yes, my emotions are raising up this, but in wise mind, I'm going to bring forward this clarity and say, that's actually not true. So maybe it would be helpful to talk about a few of those lies that people, or myths that people tend to sort of absorb into their psyche in this journey, to help them move towards a more liberated, truthful way of thinking about that. Love to hear a few of those that might resonate with listeners.
Yeah, I remember thinking, like, okay, once I get pregnant, like, this is going to be like a ticket to happiness. Like, having children is a ticket to happiness. And like, I'm just waiting for that. And so in that season,
yes,
I remember just thinking, okay, but once I get there, like, then that's going to be so great. Like, that's going to be everything.
That if this, then that, sort of waiting for my life to happen.
Totally.
Yes.
And so then in that, like, a few things were pressed pause on. There's even just like emotionally that kind of holds you back, right? If you're just like thinking, yeah, like, if I need to get to here before I can like achieve this next level of happiness. And I can remember while I was in this journey, talking to a friend who'd had young kids, and she was just like, Karen, all of us with kids are like jealous, not of your experience of not being able to, but like jealous of like the time you have, and that you can have conversations with your partner, you can do what you need to do. And like, they're all in the midst of like having young kids and the challenges there. Yeah. And so I remember that being very helpful to say, okay, like, we just need to be where we are and connect in the space that we're in and find meaning and value and joy and pleasure wherever we are.
Like along the way with this unresolved journey, not waiting for that for life to begin, or for you to explore things that matter to you, or for you to be present to yourself and have life, and breath.
Have life. Yeah. Have life and have breath. Exactly. And so I can remember, like, there was a couple of years I'm like, oh, I won't get a season's pass to go snowboarding, or maybe I won't sign up for baseball. And like, I'm just going to do the things. I'm going to go in the hot tub. I'm going to go snowboarding. I'm going to go and play baseball and go on this trip. I'm going to do these things. And then should life press pause from a pregnancy, then I will move forward when I have that information. I'm not going to be living in anticipation. I'm not going to be like pausing things. I needed to like move forward and keep doing and being and feeling whole as a human being in the midst of like this uncertain time without knowing the outcome.
Yes, I love that feeling whole. One thing that I reflect on a lot, I have a young daughter. Well, she's not that young now. She's 21, which blows my mind. But I often think about the messages to women in general about their value in roles only, right? So, but I really believe that women are complete and valued independent of ever becoming a wife, ever becoming a mother, ever becoming a doctor, a therapist, like whatever roles we put on, like these are not the ways in which we have a full, complete identity or belovedness or contribution to the world. We could never have any of those roles and still have tremendous value. And so when we're displacing sort of that sense of identity or fulfillment in this role that maybe it's somebody who is single for a long time and hasn't found a life partner and longs for that, if they're placing like that's going to then make me complete or fill out my identity, then they're not recognizing that they have the fullness of themselves with them. And those within themselves. Right, exactly. And so I always want to be careful about the messages we're sending to women, because if the message is, this is what you're designed to do, and then you don't have that experience, then you're matching yourself up with this societal norm that says that you're incomplete, that you're defective, that you don't have what it takes to have a full life. And I just think it's nonsense.
It
And
is nonsense,
so, I
but it's
love that.
pervasive in
It's
our thinking.
pervasive nonsense. You're
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
right. And so I think these journeys bring home the truth of those messages, which is, yes, I have a longing, perhaps a holy longing, even if we would call it
Hmm.
that, for a husband or for a child or for a family to be in a certain way. And
Yeah.
I can hold space for that. And I can also recognize that I am complete and valued and able to have a full and rich and meaningful and beautiful life as
Absolutely.
well. On the
Totally.
way to maybe those things happening or not happening, but I can have that fullness.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying yes to baseball, and I'm taking
Right.
the course that I want to learn about. And
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the things that are in front of me. Um, I think that's such an empowered, you know, position of goodness. I don't know if that's the right way to
Right.
say it, but I think
Yeah.
that for all of us, because even those of us navigating all those different things, like your friends that you were talking to are in the midst of being a young parent, like if they feel like they're failing at that role, there's a lot of shame in young parenthood too. And if they feel like they're failing in that role and all of their identity is wrapped up in being this good mom that they've taken this version from somewhere else, they could
Yes.
also be wrestling with identity stuff. And so wherever we find ourselves, we want to know that we're complete independent of all of those other factors. And then we move into our roles, our life experiences. Yeah. Wow.
Definitely. Yeah, another like of the lies is like kind of correlates with this is like infertility equals inadequacy because it really did feel like there I felt
Right.
like inadequate as a woman, just like you were saying,
Yes.
and inadequate in that season of life as I'm seeing everyone else move forward or
Yeah.
seemingly move forward. And yeah, I came to that space of I'm not inadequate because this is not happening.
Yes.
I'm like whole innate because innately I am whole as a human being. I'm a
Yes.
human being. And then nothing else needs to be attached to that in order for me to be a whole person. And
Yes.
so it's interesting, right? From a place, I think when you're in this like fight or flight zone, your brain's at the time, like certainly my brain wasn't thinking straight. It was just so like on task mode
Yes.
that I wasn't questioning any of these like subconscious thoughts that I was having or conscious thoughts if they were showing up. I was just thinking them and feeling them and having them in my body. And so it
Yes.
wasn't until afterwards from a place of being more calm, more settled,
Grounded. Yeah.
and grounded, where I can think like objectively, like that doesn't even make sense. Like, of course, I would never, ever think these things of someone else sitting in front of me with these issues or any other issues. I would never think that. So I had to use
Yeah.
that mirror. So I can't be thinking these things of myself. Like
Right.
that just is not logical and is like unkind and unfair to myself to
Yes.
put myself to a standard that is not true.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we often use in self-compassion work, we often use the question to say, what would you say to a friend going through what you have just described? You wouldn't say, well, you're a failure. You
Right.
really should buck up and do more. You're kind of slacking off here. But all
Right.
these narratives come up, unprovoked, just
Right.
automatically, and we don't challenge them. And part of that is just the sheer neurobiology of what's happening when we're in survival mode and being
Exactly.
operating from the amygdala and not having the full frontal cortex to discern and consider
Exactly.
and reflect. And there are strategies that we can get more into that could be helpful for people on the journey, so that when they're feeling that survival, that they can bring themselves back online to have
Yeah.
some of those considerations. But otherwise, we just operate as if whatever comes up is true.
Right.
And there's that expression like, don't believe everything you think.
Right. Yeah. So
Because
in
we
infertility, do not believe everything you
do
think.
not believe everything you
Do
think.
not.
I mean, that is such an important thing to remember. Just because it occurs to you as a thought, it does not mean that you need to absorb that and operate as if that's true. You get to
Right.
look at that and examine it and decide.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling in that space of those automatic thoughts, just sort of like you say, pervasively dictating that survival mode, that's a spot where a therapist can really step in and
Yeah.
help you with strategies to move you out of that automatic autopilot operating into a
Yeah.
more conscious, responsive, clarifying space and help you settle your nervous system so you can feel like you can think more clearly, right? And live in the moments as they unfold. And so, yeah, that's so interesting. You're right. That's such an important message to not assume that just because it came up for you in this journey. I'm sure there are lots of common things that do come up for women going through this journey, that means that that's true. And to consider, is that what you would pronounce over someone who you loved going through that journey as a mirror to bring back the self-reflection and compassion you need?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that like played out when I started going to, like, before Oasis was Oasis, there was a different group, and
Okay.
and I remember it was clarifying in that way when I could sit and hold compassion for these other women when we were sharing our stories. And so then it was helpful for me then to say, I'm just this, I'm the same as everyone else. I'm here. I'm coming in here with a story, and I'm coming in here with my journey, and we're all like good, whole people here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm part of this too. I'm not in a different realm that needs to
be harder on myself.
Right. Be harder on myself. Like that. No, I'm just the same, and we're all in this together, and we're all whole people in this moment, regardless of
as
whatever.
we are.
As we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? I just love that so much. And maybe that's a great sentiment to start to wind up our conversation on today. We are whole as we are, independent of our productivity or reproductive productivity, if you will. I don't know if that's redundant to say, but I think just to be able to sit and tell ourselves those truths, and so many more in your book, of course, that people can access and remind themselves of some healthier mindsets and some ways to navigate the journey with that self-compassion. So important. Wow. Well, we're asking, I just have loved this conversation, and I know there's such a need, and I know people will have further questions, and will hopefully connect with you and with Oasis. We'll put all those things in the notes. But why don't you start with telling us a little bit about where people can find you, Karen, and where I know you had said initially, I don't just work within fertility. This is obviously my journey. I'm a general, practitioner. But I'm sure that people who are dealing with that and navigating that and wanting support would love to know that somebody has that genuine compassion and empathy for their experience. And so where could people find your work, your writing? How can they connect with you?
They can connect with me on my website, karensnow.ca.
Okay.
There's a link on my website to my Infertility Lies account.
Great.
And then I'm on Instagram, Karen Snow ND.
Okay.
And then I have an Instagram account as well, Infertility Lies.
Okay, great. And so those are all spots that we'll get in the show notes for people. So if you're driving and listening, don't worry, they'll be there for you. You won't miss them. We'll be able to connect you with Karen. And so just for fun, at the end of this series of conversations that we're having with authors, we like to talk about what is currently in your bedside book stack. And so for those of us who are readers and writers, we know that there is always a developing pile of books that are inspiring us, that we're reading, of all different genres, perhaps. Yes. But we'd love to hear 2 or 3 titles that are in that bedside book stack for you right now that might be of interest to our listeners to explore as well.
Yeah, I'm reading right now the book, The Origins of You. Okay. I read like heavier reads. I'm not like, sometimes I'll read a few light reads. It's coming into the summer, but I'll read The Origins of You and Vienna Perron. Okay. And I also have When the Body Says No. I just completed this book, but When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a fascinating read and lens, I'm sure, to put on this conversation also.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. So those are great. And so tell me a little bit about what you're loving from those 2 titles.
So When the Body Says No, I've had this book for, I don't know, over 10 years. And I just like started reading into it. And it is just the most fascinating read of just like what our experiences, how they influence on a cellular level, like our bodies. Yes. So what we go through, what we think, how we feel, and then like the physiological reaction, how
Yeah.
there's different trends in different conditions
Yes.
of mindsets and how that's playing out on a physiological level. And so like the world is stressful, life is stressful, and it's just like a good lens of like, we need space to like decompress, to be
Yes.
kind of actually from the start of our conversation, be it in nature and ground,
Yes.
be just going back to the very basics of what we need as human beings,
Yes.
and like sunlight and fresh air and open space and
Nutritious
trees,
food. Yes.
nutritious food, hands in the soil. Like it's just
Yeah.
kind of just goes back to the very basics, and I can pull things from there in the work that I do with patients every day of just the importance of slowing down and like these things have such a physiological impact that we
Yes.
need to pay more attention to the way our environment and our world is impacting the cells of our body.
Yes. I think there's so much where people think we're living sort of in these waffle
Right.
compartments or something. It's like my emotional health is not connected to how I'm doing
Right.
physiologically, is not connected to how I'm doing relationally, is not connected to how I'm doing on a cellular level or
Yes.
neurobiologically. And we're so intricately
Yes.
connected. And so that's one of the places where I think, that integration and that holistic health perspective that I think you and I are both really passionate about
Yes.
allows us to look, it's going to matter. These factors matter. It's not
Yeah.
just an isolated thing that we're looking at that's going on in your physical system. We want to look at this, what other factors in your system could be contributing to that and start to
Totally.
provide supports and look at it holistically. Yeah. So he's
Yeah.
so just profoundly wise and helpful in that space, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm fascinated by his work. I keep following it. And yeah, that book was just like,
Yeah.
although it's a new book, it was just very impactful at the time I was reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how we do. I heard somebody say one time that you should collect books like fine wines where they go into like a cellar so that they're there for when you need to pull them out. You don't have to feel
Yes.
this pressure to drink them or to
Yeah.
read them right
Yeah.
away. It's like when you're ready, you pull that one off. And so books will find their way to us in those times. And yeah, that's so great.
I like that sentiment. That's
Yes.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel the pressure of the book stack, right? Like I've got to get through it. So no, I'm okay to pick up and put down, and in seasons I'll draw to that. I know that's what I want in my bookseller, if you will. And when
Yes.
the time is right, I'll pull it out. Well, I know there's lots of great titles here. We'll make sure they're in the show notes as well to recommend. We always love a good book recommendation. And for those of you who may not know, we do have a wellness bookshop here as part of Covey Wellness Center. And so we curate lots of amazing books in the health and wellness and spirituality space, including getting Karen's book in as well to support people. And so we would love for you to come in and find a resource that might be helpful to you in what you're going through as well. So, and of course, if you are looking for a therapist along the way for this infertility journey, or want to connect with one of the support groups through Oasis Fertility Support Network, we'll make sure those resources are there. We're here for you. We don't want you to be walking through this alone. And we would really appreciate it if you would also share this episode to others who might find it as an encouragement if you know that their story might resonate. And so thanks for listening in. And Karen, again, thanks for taking your time today to join with us. I do hope this is the first and not the last of our conversations and overlapping connections. I've just really enjoyed our time together, and really appreciate you taking the courage to share your story in this way for others to read.
Thanks so much. It's been great to chat with you.
Okay, awesome. Until next time.
Bye.